How's it going, guys? Cats here, and today we're going to be taking a look at last week's card of the days for Kiznaiver. So we have some very interesting cards from last week's previews, a couple very strong ones, as well as some more niche cards that are going to be going into their own deck. So let's get right into it with Sunday's 0-0 Utah. So this is a card that can be compared to Amagi or Ellie in that it's an Akatsuki effect that is tied to a specific condition being met. So with Ellie, it was if you put a card into your level zone. With Amagi, it's if you play a climax. So this one is a little bit different, but I'll explain why exactly it's like an Amagi later on. So the card's trigger is when you play a Bonder, you can discard one and rest two characters to do an Akatsuki effect. You look at up to 4 cards from the top of your deck, choose a Kiznaiver character among them, add it to your hand, send the rest to the waiting room. And you get to give one of your characters 1500 power until the end of the turn. His second effect is a little bit less relevant, but it might come in handy sometimes. Kill one of your own characters with Bond to give a character a 2500 point boost until the end of the turn. So this is a very powerful utility effect for Kiznaiver. It interacts in very interesting ways with all the different kinds of bonds that are available. Now the reason I say it's like a Magi, so Utah himself is not a plus. You're discarding one to dig through your top up to 4 to get a card. So this is not a +1, but at the same time, you have to consider that the trigger for Utah's effect to activate is playing a bond, which is for 2 out of the 3 types of bond, it is a plus. If you play pay 1 stock bond, that is a +1, and if you're playing a clock bond, you clock yourself for 1 damage, you get a +1. So in the end, what ends up happening is you play the Bonder, you get the +1, and you get a hand filter, which is very strong. You're effectively fixing like 2 cards out of your hand in that sense. Even more so with discard bond, where it's actually a double hand filter, because you're discarding 1 card for Utah's ability, and you're discarding a second card for the bond. So you get to fix 2 cards out of your hand for the bond target and one of the 4 cards out of the top, one of the cards out of the top 4 of your deck. So I think this is going to be a very powerful core card for Kiznaiver, and this basically brings like the whole bond thing together and gives the set something unique that other sets don't have. This is like the card that really sets Kiznaiver apart from other sets. I feel that this is going to replace conventional brainstorms in other decks. Other decks, they like to run search or salvage brainstorms, some sort of advantage generating plus brainstorm. And the reason I say that is because this card has a rest 2 cost in order to use his ability. So plus brainstormers, they have either tap self or tap 2 characters as part of their cost, so that you can't spam it all the time. And this card, the way it interacts with a bond, which is effectively inherently a +1, this card, I think, will replace conventional plus brainstorms in this deck. Now, I do think that there is still the possibility of there being spammable brainstorms, whether it's a power brainstorm, like spammable search, spammable salvage, discard, things like that. Or search and discard, salvage and discard, because they don't rest characters. So I think that those could still find a place in this set or in this deck. But as for conventional plus brainstorms, I think that this card will be replacing that, at least for this set. Now, a couple more things that I want to address. When you play the Bonder with this card, the thing that makes it so flexible and so powerful is that you get to choose the order between this card resolving its effect or you using the Bond. So let's say you play a Bonder, you don't have the target in your waiting room yet, but it's in your hand. So play your Bonder, use Utah's ability, tap 2 characters, discard the bond target, and then look through the top 4, add whatever, and then you have the bond target in your waiting room, bond it. Awesome. Or if you don't even have it in your hand, you can play a Bonder, discard a card, look through the top 4 cards of your deck. Oh, hey, look, there's the bond target. So I don't choose that card to add my hand. I add something different, send it to waiting room, and then you bond it back out into your hand. So it's very flexible as to what you can do with this card and bonds in this set. Okay, now one more thing that I want to address is that I did a ruling like 1 or 2 weeks ago about abilities that activate up to once per turn. This is an ability that activates up to once per turn. So why is this important? Let's say your field is completely empty, and I play a Bonder. At this point, I probably use Yuta's ability, because I mean, like, there's like really no reason not to. But at the same time, when you use Yuta's ability, assuming your field was like completely empty before, you lose out on the 1500 buff, or you're going to be giving it to like basically something that won't be able to attack. So you do have to be careful about the order that you play your cards in. Like, you want to play your attacker, and then you play a Bonder, and then you can give the 1500 buff to your attacker. This obviously becomes a problem if you have no suitable attackers in your hand already, or like super worst case scenario is that the Bond target is the attacker that you were going to play, because then you're wasting your 1500 buff. So if you decide not to use Yuta's ability, well, then you've already used up its once per turn activation when you played the first Bonder. So if you like play your first Bonder of the turn, and then you bond into like a 1-0 55 vanilla. Like, let's say you bond into the TD Chidori, and then you play the TD Chidori, you play another Bonder, you can't use Yuta's effect. You can't use it to hand filter, you can't use it to give the 1500 buff, so you have to be very, very careful about the order that you're going to be doing things when you play with the Yuta. Outside of that, I think this card is going to be an extremely powerful card, excellent card that's going to give this set its identity as, it's already notable for having like a lot of Bond cards, but this is really what solidifies the deck's strategy, and it basically makes one of the best mechanics in the game even better. Okay, now moving on to other cards, because I've been talking about that for a good 6 or so minutes. So next we have this 0-0 Honoka. She's a global 500, and she has a discard bond to a 1-0 Nico, which is going to be the card after this. So global 500, already an acceptable effect. It bonds to an important 1-0 because the 1-0 is needed for a finisher, which is going to be the card after the 1-0. Now the 1-0 is a 65, which means that this Honoka, being a global 500, is going to make it into a 7k, which is pretty good if you can get around the oversizes downsides. In any deck that runs the 3-2 finisher, you're going to want to run the 1-0, and by extension, you're probably going to want to run this 0-0 as well. In any deck that doesn't run the 3-2 finisher, I probably don't run either of these, so there's better cards that you can be running. Now, next up we have the 1-0 in question. So it's 1065. When it's on the stage, it has level -1. So it can die to level 0 Suiciders. Your opponent can side attack it without a penalty. The only notable thing about this card is... Oh, and then the other downside is when this card is reversed in battle, you put it on the bottom of your deck. So the only notable thing about this card is that you need it for the 3-2. Outside of that, this card is pretty freaking bad. There's not a chance in hell that I would ever consider running this card if I wasn't already running the 3-2. That being said, the 3-2 is a decent finisher card for this set. So, unfortunately, this is the card that you're stuck with if you want to run that finisher. Another really stupid downside is that the fact that this card gets sent to the bottom of the deck, if it gets reversed, you can't even re-bond it with the Honoka because it's on the bottom of your deck. It doesn't even go to the waiting room anymore. So that just adds to like the amount of bad this card is. And like I said before, you're not running the 3-2, don't even look at this card. This card sucks. But if you are running the 3-2, oh well, you're kind of forced to run this. Next up, we have the 3-2 herself. So this is the 3-2 Nico, double R. Oh, and if I didn't mention already, the 0-0 Yuta, the first card that I looked at, that is a double R. So rip wallet, because every Kiznaiver deck, like on the planet, is going to be running that card. Or like the like meta version of Kiznaiver. Anyway. So 3-2 Nico. On play, draw 2, discard 1, and she has a climax combo that gives stuff cancel burn. This is a card profile that we've seen again and again and again and again. We've seen it on Yami, we've seen it on EO and Schoolgirl Strikers, we've seen it on Kuroyuki Hime. We've just seen this again and again and again, and frankly, it's getting old. Now, as for this card itself, I think this is one of the worst iterations of that effect that we've seen so far. Yes, it has draw 2, drop 1, which is good. It lets you dig for the climax. It lets you dig for the 1/0 that you need for the discard cost. Because okay, so what the climax combo is when you play the climax. So it's not like on attack. It's when you play it. You discard 2, and then you pay 2, and then you discard the 1/0 Nico that I just showed you. Then all of your characters in the front row get 1k and a cancel burn. What else is there to say about this card? You're forced to run a bad 1/0. It doesn't have hexproof, which is a pretty big deal, honestly. And nothing else in this set has hexproof, so you can't even like combo it with something to make sure that some damage is going to stick. I think it's good and bad at the same time that her climax combo ability activates when the climax is played. And the reason it's good and bad is that, so let's say you have 2 copies of this 3/2 Nico. You're not getting diminishing returns as long as you can activate, as long as you can pay cost on both of their abilities. You're getting 2 cancel burns across the board. Whereas if you look at a card like Schoolgirl Striker's EO, it's on attack, which means that you're getting diminishing returns on every copy past the first one. The first one, you're giving your whole field a cancel burn, which is 3 cards. But the second one, you're only effectively giving 2 cards cancel burn because one of your characters already attacked. So that's the good part. The bad part is that this means you need more stock going into your climax phase. If you want to use 2 copies of this Nico, you need to have 8 cards in stock already. And if you want to play other cards, then you're going to need the stock for those too. So I think that the card is decent if you can play 2 copies of it with 8 stock. I think 8 stock is very realistic. I think getting 2 copies of that specific 1/0 in your hand is much less realistic. But you never know. This card might just be pretty good, and people end up running this. Personally, what I think is the best way to play this card is you play like 1 copy of this, you play the Bodyguard, and you play who cares, like some third costless character. It doesn't matter. Something that can swing to deal damage. This way, you get 1 cancel burn across the board. You only need to have 6 stock. You have the Bodyguard on your next turn, which you can use with like the heal counter. I talked about that silly heal counter combo last week. You guys can go to last week's episode and check that out. So that is what I think of this card. I think it is a decent card. So far, I think it's probably the best finisher that this set has. I don't think it's amazing, but I think it's okay. It's definitely a passable card, and one that I think Kiznaiver players will be using. So there you have it. And again, the 1/0 is garbage. Okay, now moving on to the blue cards. We have a 1/0 Sonozaki. I believe this is the younger version of her, when she's actually like not being a pissy, angsty weirdo, or so I've heard from people that actually watch the show. So the important ability here is she has climax combo with the book. On attack, draw a card. There's no condition. You don't have to reverse. You don't have to pay any stock. You don't have to have a field requirement. You just draw. Her second ability, or first ability rather, is when she's placed on the stage from hand, she gets plus 500 power times the number of Kizuna characters on your stage, including her. So the first card that a lot of people compare this to is a 1/0 Ilya from Fate UEW2, which is a 1/0 5k stock soul combo. On attack, if you have a full field of masters or servants, you draw a card. Again, doesn't have to reverse, doesn't have any stock requirement, but it has a full field requirement. Now, the thing is that ability makes Ilya lose 500 power. It goes from a 5500 to a 5k. Now, this Sonozaki, if you just take a look at the first effect, where she gets 500 power times the number of Kizuna characters, that's normally an ability that makes your card lose 500. it would take it from a 5500 to a 5k. Examples of this are cards like the 1-0 Kirito from Sword Art Online. He's a 1-0 5k and he has this effect. Now, if this Sonozaki's climax combo required full field, then that would reduce her power by 500 to 4500, if that makes sense. It's a lot of like card design math that some people might not understand, but hopefully someone out there gets what I'm talking about. So if this had a full field requirement to draw a card, this would be a 4500, but it does not, so it's a 4k, which I think is kind of stupid, because this card has an ability that gains power based on your field size. So it probably would have been a better card to just make it a 4500 that has a full field requirement, because you're going to want a full field for the extra power anyways. Now, regardless of that, this card is still a good card. It's going to be drawing you cards for free, it's going to be gaining power for free, and the climax is a 1k one, so it's going to make it easier for you to kill stuff. So, in the end, I think the card's fine. I think it could have been better. I think the two abilities could have synergized a little bit better, but I think the card is good, and so far we haven't seen a whole lot of blue. We've seen this, we've seen the 3-2 that makes your opponent take the same amount of damage as you. So not a whole lot of blue support yet, so not sure how effective this card is going to be yet in the whole grand scheme of things, but as a standalone card, this is looking like a pretty good level 1 option. Okay, now we get on to the weird stuff. So this is Gomorin, and this is going to create an entirely different Kiznaiver deck, one that does not have, or at least from what I can see, is not using bonds as its core mechanic, and yeah, that's pretty much that's pretty much what sets it apart from every other Kiznaiver deck, because those are all going to be using bonds as their main advantage source. Okay, so Gomorin 00500. You can run any number of this card in your deck. When you play it, mill 3, and when you play it, you can choose up to X Gomorin from your waiting room and put them under this card as markers. So you can get a maximum of 3 markers, assuming that you play this and your front row is now full. And for each marker under this card, it gets plus 1500 power. So with 3 markers, you have a 005k. It's not like that's pretty easy to do, depending on how many Gomorins you run. And the fact that it gets to mill targets into the waiting room, also pretty good. This deck is going to be milling a lot. You can mill 3 every single time you play one of these. So if you are out a lot of climaxes early, fear not, because you're gonna fix your deck like immediately by playing a bunch of this card. And at the same time, if you can get a whole bunch of this to stick on your stage and like not die, and they all have like 3 markers each under them, your compression is going to be insane. And it's a very, very silly card. Don't get me wrong. I have no clue how good or bad this deck is going to be. Somebody's going to come up with like a decent list for this card. But right now, I just think it's a silly card. It's going to go into a side deck, like the non-meta deck. But it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun to use. Now we're going to get onto some cards that interact with Gomorin, starting with this 3-2 Sonozaki. So she's a rare. 3285. You can early summon her if you have 6 or more Gomorin in your waiting room, which shouldn't be too hard, because you're probably going to be running a crap ton of them so that you can put markers under all your stuff. So 6 or more probably not going to be too hard to get at all. When you play her, you mill 2 and then deal X damage, where X equals the number of soul trigger icons on those 2 cards. So let's say you mill 2 level 3s. Each one of them has 1 soul trigger on it. You burn for 2 damage. Pretty cool. When you play her, you choose up to 3 Gomorin from your waiting room and put them under her as a marker. And for each marker, she gets 1k power. So with 3 markers, which should be very, very easy to achieve, if you're early dropping her, you already have 6 in your waiting room. So getting 3 is next to impossible, pretty much. So she's an 11-5. Big card. Potential burn on play. But something you have to worry about is that the more Gomorins that you're playing in your deck, that's more blank triggers. So less actual soul triggers that you're putting in your deck, so that Sonozaki can mill and burn your opponent. So you have to find the right balance of how many triggers to put, how many Gomorins to put if you're going to be playing this deck. And yeah, so this deck has no advantage at all. Like none of these cards can be bonded to or are bonds. So gonna have to find some way to gain advantage with this deck. Or if these just like stick on the board through your level 2 game, maybe you can just ride them out into level 3, maybe. Okay, next up we have some level 1s for the Gomorin deck. So, very, very simple card. When you play him, put up to 2 Gomorins from your waiting room under him as markers. And for each marker, he gets 1500 power. With 2 markers, which is going to be very, very easy, he becomes a 1065, which is perfectly fine. This deck needs big beaters because this deck needs stuff that stays alive because this deck doesn't have advantage. So you need your stuff to stay alive. So play this card. The next one is how you keep your opponent's stuff from staying alive. So he's a 1/0, 4k with Hand Encore, and when he attacks, he gets 4k if you have a Gomorin in your clock. Fun tip, don't play this when you're at 1/0. Outside of that, it's AK Burst, and you can throw away random trash in your hand that you don't need anymore. Kind of a whatever card. Okay, now we're getting on to the last day's previews. So we have Thursday. So this is a 0/0 Shiori and Asuka. I don't know who these characters are, but they probably have something to do with Katsuhira or whatever his name is, the white-haired guy. This card's very good. When it's placed on stage from hand, choose one of your Kiznaiver characters, and it gets plus 1500 power this turn. And activate, pay 1, and send it to memory. Look it up to 4 cards from the top of your deck. Choose a Kiznaiver character, add it to your hand, send the rest to the waiting room. It's an Akatsuki effect. Or rather, it's Nanoha? Fate and Nanoha? I believe somebody pointed out to me that Fate and Nanoha had this effect, where it was like pay 1, send it to memory, and then look at top 4. Alright, now the stupid part about this card is that you can give a 1500 buff to something else, and then just get the hell out, replace this with something else that's more usable, and then this goes to memory. So this is going to be out of your way for the rest of the game. In fact, you want this card to be in memory because it turns on an early summon for the next card that's going to come up. So this card plus the 0/0 Yuta, you're going to be milling a crap ton with this deck, which is perfect because you want to be filling up the waiting room with bond targets. So you can get your bonds, get your advantage, things like that. Awesome stuff. And if you're out a lot of climaxes, you're going to be able to get your refresh really, really quickly. And like I said, this card plays into the next card, which makes this card even more bonkers because it actually interacts with your game plan as opposed to just being like, oh, I want to mill my deck and give a 1500 buff while I do it. So here we have the 3/2 Katsuhira. I've seen a lot of mixed opinions on this card. Some people were saying that this was kind of whatever, and some people were saying that this card is pretty bonkers. Personally, I think this card's pretty bonkers. So it's an early summon if you have 2 copies of that 0/0 I just showed you in memory. And it sends itself to memory by its own effect. So not very hard. When he's placed on stage from hand, this is the bonkers part, by the way. Mill 1, and then kill an opponent's character whose level is equal or lower than the level of the card you milled. So no matter what you mill, you can mill literally anything, and you kill a 0 for free, guaranteed. That is so stupid. So, like, if your opponent's deck is something that, like, crutches on back row in any way, like, if they're playing, like, 0/0 Ellie, or Amagi, or Brainstorms, or anything, you play this card, you kill it for free. Sometimes you can kill, like, if you get lucky, you can kill, like, a level support. Sometimes you get lucky, you kill their, like, level 1 back row, or their level 2 back row. Sometimes you'll be playing against, like, Log Horizon, you'll slap this guy down, mill a 3, and say, ha, fuck you, Shiroi, get out of here. So, like, that effect, I think, is very, very strong. And a lot of people play level 0 back rows, so there's no reason that anybody should be calling this effect weak. It's free removal, and it's guaranteed like 80% of the time, unless your opponent plays double level 1 back row. Okay, we're not even done yet. So this card has a Gate Climax combo. When it attacks, you salvage 1 for free, and you get you get a 1500 buff until the end of the opponent's next turn. So he's going to be a 3/2 11k before supports, who gets you a free card and blows up a card. Now, it is a mandatory salvage. Like, you have to salvage with this effect. Like, you don't have a choice. If you attack and you have the climax in play, you have to salvage. Now, this interacts with anti-salvage. Now, the most common anti-salvages being played right now are Mekons. Mekon's a level 0. Guess what this card does when you play him? You get to blow up a level 0 for free. Guaranteed. This card is just so underestimated by some people, I think. I think it's a very, very strong mid-game card, and it doesn't have anything to do with bonds, but regardless, I think this card is very, very good. It's a great mid-game option with a really, really simple, easy-to-fulfill early drop condition, and he just minuses your opponent for free for no reason. Now, the only problem with this card is being able to control what you mill. You don't always know you're gonna. If your opponent has a level 1 back row that you really want to kill, you don't know you're gonna mill a level 1 or a level 0. So, like, let's just give him help. So this is the first Hisomu card that we've seen in the entire set, and he works perfectly with the 3/2 that I just showed you. When you play this guy, look at up to top 2 cards of your deck, and then reorder them in any way you want. So play him, look at top 2. Hey, look, a level 2. Let's put that on top. Mill it. Kill your stuff for free. Awesome. Now, my main problem with this card is that it is a level 1. And for a card like this, where it's a very utility-based effect, this is typically better on a level 0. So the PR from Excel World, like there was a PR Fuko that just came out that has this exact same effect, but it's on a level 0. That would have been much, much stronger than this card. But regardless, I still think that this card is it's playable, but it does force you to run blue in your deck if you want that interaction. Worst case scenario, you play this guy, you don't have the 3/2, you look at the top 2 cards of your deck, and you get to see what your triggers are. So, it's a passable card. Definitely synergizes well with the 3/2, but would have been much better as a level 0. Alright, that's all for this week. My voice is killing me. As you can probably tell, I've been like coughing throughout the video. Probably should be drinking more water. Okay, but anyways, that's all for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed this week's Card of the Day reviews, and soon I'm going to be doing... I really need to catch up on my reviews for Gochiusa and Excel World, and I want to do videos on the Love Live Sunshine TD, as well as the Kiznaiver TD, because those have some very interesting cards as well. But I'll get to that when I get to that, so stay tuned, and until next time, this has been Peshcats. Bye.